Hi, and welcome to Nursery Rhymes in Modern Times, where we investigate the traditional and modern nursery rhymes and how they fit into our contemporary society. If you've been hanging out with me for a while, you know that we're not just focusing on nursery rhymes and songs that are based in the United States. We are looking at things from a global perspective. And today we're going to be talking a little bit more about that global perspective and how things might change with changing the language in which those nursery rhymes are presented. So, there are a lot of benefits to translating a nursery rhyme from a foreign language to your own. You can understand the words better, and you might be able to then understand a little bit more about where that song comes from and how it fits into that culture. But are there some things that are missed in translation that can only really be understood if you're familiar with the culture on its own and how the words go together? It's a good question. So to kind of talk about this in a different way, I just want to share a story about myself. So there was one time where I delivered a story time entirely in French to a non-French speaking audience. It was a half an hour of speaking in French, singing in French, talking in French, doing all of the things that you normally do in a story time, but in French. And so what I had to decide was, do I incorporate songs that are traditional to French culture in this story time? Do I take familiar American style nursery rhymes and translate them into French? And how does that work and what happens then? So in this story time, I ended up doing a little bit of both. I did things like head, shoulders, knees, and toes, which if you are familiar with that song, then you know that it talks about different body parts. If you're not familiar, it goes like this. Head and shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. Head and shoulders, knees and toes, and eyes and ears, a mouth and a nose. Head and shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. It's a great song for proprioception, getting those gross motor movements going. And it's a lot of fun, especially because you can go fast and slow. And so there's lots of things you can do with that song. So what I decided to do was to translate it into French, which sounds like this. Tête, épaules, genoux et pieds, genoux et pieds. Tête, épaules, genoux et pieds, genoux et pieds. Yeux, oreilles, bouche et nez. Tête, épaules, genoux et pieds, genoux et pieds. So for the most part, it's the same body parts in French. So it made it very accessible for my audience that did not know French to do a song that they already knew, so they could do all the movements, but they heard the words in a different language. So in that case, there wasn't a whole lot that was lost in translation. But if you were to sing the song Sur le pont d'Avignon, sur le pont d'Avignon, l'on y danse, sur le pont d'Avignon, l'on y danse tous en rond. You can sing it in English. It's just talking about singing and dancing on a bridge in Avignon. And if you know about the history of Avignon, that bridge no longer exists. So there is some history and culture that is interwoven into that song if you're familiar with French culture. So there are things to consider as you are trying to decide whether to translate a song into your home language from its original. Whether you're going to capture all of the elements of that song, whether you are going to understand all of the cultural components that go into it if you're not already familiar with that culture, and then how that is translated to the kiddos that you're working with. So on the plus side, you are engaging with the kiddos that you serve in the language that's comfortable for them, while you're also exploring a potentially unfamiliar culture. On the other side, you might be missing some really important elements of that culture that can only really be communicated through that language in the first place. So I don't know that there is a right or wrong answer to this. There are a lot of gray areas, as we've talked about before. I'd love to know how you have approached this, if you've ever translated a song from one language to another, how that's landed with your audience, if that is something that you feel is really important to share with kiddos, if you have a cultural background that is different from the dominant culture in your area, and how that affects the nursery rhymes that you hear and sing with your kiddos. All of those things are really interesting to me. You can share them in the comments below, or you can email me directly. Remember to like, subscribe, and share, and pass this along to anyone who might be interested in talking about nursery rhymes from a global and contemporary perspective. There's a lot to unpack here, and I appreciate you joining me on this journey. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.